And I had a couple of realizations. The first one was I realized that my mom didn't die because she was an addict. My mom died because she didn't love herself. And that further went to my next aha moment of like, I don't love myself either.
Right.
And so how do I really begin to build that journey of loving myself? And I think that's really the secret to life.
My guest today is an entrepreneur, speaker, and the host of the top-rated podcast, The Growth Now Movement. He has been named a top 8 podcaster to follow by Inc. magazine. He's featured in Thrive Global and chosen as an icon of influence. He's also the host and creator of one of the go-to events for entrepreneurs and forward thinkers, Growth Now Summit Live. Welcome to the show, my buddy, Justin Schenck.
Mike, dude, I'm so excited to be here. I can't wait to see where we go. And hopefully it's an interesting conversation your audience approves.
Yes, I definitely know they will. We got a lot of like-minded people in here, early stage entrepreneurs, people that are looking to thrive, people who are looking to grow, reach up. I mean, your show is exactly what they're going to be looking for. So I love it. It's great if we introduce some people to your show. I'm sure there's going to be some cross-pollination, your audience checking you out on this platform. So anybody who's doing that, thank you for being with us today, whether you're tuning in on YouTube. We love you to be with us, and thank you for being here. Apple, Spotify, however you're tuning in, thank you for joining us today. I got a really cool, this is an awesome interview I've been preparing for a long time. I'm fired up for the show if you couldn't tell. We're going to take a deep dive into the power of podcasting. Obviously, Justin, that's his expertise. You heard it at the top of the show. Before we hit on all of that, I want to go a little bit deeper into Justin's story. Some people haven't heard this yet, right? And we're going to introduce you to the mic'd up audience the proper way here. So let's time travel a little bit, Justin. We want to go back to the time in your youth, maybe in your teens at this point. You got a GPA of 1.7. Your mom is on a 20-year battle with drugs. Your dad's in jail. Things are not looking up for you at that moment. I mean, if we were to actually place a bet on you, I mean, what's the odds that you're going to be a successful entrepreneur someday, beautiful family, and doing all the amazing things that you're doing today? So take us back to that. I wanted to kind of set it up and walk us through, how you ended up in that place. Obviously a lot of that when you're young is not in your control. So kind of your situation you were in, and then how the heck did you get yourself out of that?
Yeah, man. So obviously, like you said, right, 1.7 GPA, mom was in the middle of a 20-year battle with opioids, and my dad was in jail. And so they actually say statistically, if your parent's an addict, you have a 50% chance of being an addict. And if your parent's in jail, you have a 50% chance of ending up in jail. Like if you do the math, I'm 100% screwed, right? Like there's no shot.
But thankfully, it doesn't work like that. It's just like if you have 2 coupons and it's 50% off and 50% off, it's not 100% off. They take it off that second amount. So that's how you squeak through, baby. Math was actually in your favor at that point.
Fingers crossed, right? And I think really the secret sauce was from a very young age, I was very self-aware, right? Mm-hmm. Like I knew that what was happening around me was not the life that I wanted. I didn't know necessarily where I wanted to go. Like podcasting wasn't even a thing when I was 16. Right. And it's weird that that's what I do now. But like all I knew was I didn't want to be where my parents were, right? Mm-hmm. And so always had that in the back of my mind. So how do I surround myself with the right people? Like I did have great mentors. My uncle and my aunt were really, really great in my life. And so I think I latched on to them at a young age and paid attention and saying, that's kind of a life that I would like to create for myself. And then when I was 19, I got into direct sales because obviously if you have a 1.7 GPA, you're not getting into college. Yeah. And I did do community college for about 3 semesters, but hated it. But at 19, got into direct sales, where I started to learn about the idea of entrepreneurship and self-development. So my mentor within the organization handed me a book called Who Moved My Cheese? And if you've never read that book, it's a great book, super quick read. Like I always highly recommend everybody read it, even if they're not readers. But right. I read it, and the book is essentially about how things are going to change around you, and that doesn't matter. What matters is how you react to that change. Mm-hmm. And I realized this was speaking directly to me, right? Like, everything that kind of I went through in my life was not my fault up to that point. Not to say that I didn't mess up more as an adult, but up to that point, nothing was my fault. And I had to take ownership of where I was and take ownership of where I was going. Thus began my journey of discovering who is Justin and what am I bringing to the world and what does that look like? And that really started at 19.
And that's incredible. So obviously the 1.7 GPA has nothing to do with your potential and your ability. We know that, we see that now. And some people just, the classroom's not where they're going to shine. And I was kind of one of those too. I was a 3.3, but that was because, I just showed up and did my homework and kind of schmoozed the teacher a little bit, right? But I mean, I wasn't academically top in my class, and I know it. But I know you have way more potential than that. I'm glad at 19, still young, still have, a lot of ability to kind of turn things around, is when you started to get that mentorship, reading great books. I actually believe I have that book. Someone may have gifted it to me and I need to read it. And it's come up a bunch of times on the show. So, absolutely love that. And something we both have an admiration for Ed Milet. Right. I know you've actually had him on your show. I'm going to get him on mic'd up at some point. He's the reason I got into entrepreneurship, just so you know. I listened to his story with the water being turned off and him and his wife. And you know what? I don't have to share it. If someone's listening to this and you don't know who Ed Milet is or his story, please go and check it out. You're going to see why Justin and I connect so well with him. But he mentions a lot on his show that things happen for you, not to you. And can you share how this experience, now that you have a more mature reflection on it, can you share some of the ways that this actually is helping you today, your background?
Yeah, I think more than anything, right? When we look back, and that is still also one of my favorite things that he said. And I think everybody says it now, but I'm pretty sure he was the first one to say it's happening for me, not to me.
I think he gives Tony Robbins the tip of the cap because they may have had the conversation or whatever together, but still it's something that Ed preaches for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it really resonated with me too. And I realized it's really about when you're going through those hard times, you go, what can I take from this to better my life, to better myself, to do all those things? And you kind of create that moment of like, yeah, I can't control this, but what can I control in this moment? And honestly, for me, the worst moment of my life has built a platform for me in a weird way. And I struggled with it internally for a while. So 6 months before I launched the podcast, my mom lost her battle to opioids. And this became my speaking point almost from the beginning. And so when you talk about like life happening for you, that was the worst moment of my life. My mom, although she had her own issues, she was a great mom. She was my biggest cheerleader, my friend, total mama's boy through and through my whole entire life. But if it weren't for that moment, I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing now. I don't think that I would have the accolades. I don't think I'd be speaking on stages. I don't think I'd have the businesses that I have. And it's really the greatest example of like, I had two things to choose right there. I could go down a path of destruction, which I did for a short time. We can get into that if you want. Or I can make something of myself and say, what lessons does this teach me that I can then in turn teach other people? And so, yeah, man, like, I think that's the greatest example for me of like, life is happening for me. And I know that I can take on anything else that may happen in the future because bad things are always going to happen. It's just about how you react to them.
Right. How you react to it and take ownership. And even it's hard because a lot of times, man, I have nothing to say with all of this stuff that's going on. I had another guest, Kyle Livingston. I don't know if you've heard of him, but his story is crazy too. I mean, he was adopted and basically left at a yard sale and all. Just a really crazy story. And
wow,
and he ended up in a really bad situation for many years. And same thing. I mean, if everybody's playing the odds, they're definitely not in his favor. And you would think he'd be in jail with all kinds of problems. And he's a highly successful business entrepreneur now too. Very similar. So it's amazing. Do you kind of recall in your story when that shift happened, or was it over time? Was it like throughout your early 20s where you're kind of building these stepping stones to be who you are now? Or was there kind of an aha moment where you realized I got to really get the bull by the horns?
I think so. So one, from the beginning to when I launched the podcast, it was a slow progression of, figuring out who I am as a person, as a man, trying to navigate life. But I think there is a specific moment where I was like, okay, now it's time to take full control. And what ended up happening was when my mom passed away, I went on a 3-month bender where I was blackout drunk 6 nights a week.
This is what, about 2015, 16, just to put it on a timeline?
This was the end of 2015.
Okay, because your show launched in 16, if I recall, right?
Yeah. So not that long ago, right? When you really think about it. Now, obviously, I made great progress in my life at that point. I was really successful in my corporate job. I had great friends. I was able to do some really cool things in my life. I was planning on, doing this podcast, and I had big ideas. And when she passed away, I literally numbed the pain for 3 months. That's what I was doing, right? Like just numbing the pain. And I had a coach at the time that I had called, or she called me one day, and she goes, "Hey, what are you doing tonight?" And I said, "I'm going out with some buddies." And she goes, "No, you're not. You're going to sit and you're going to feel this." And that evening was probably one of the hardest evenings of my life, as I truly allowed myself to go through the grieving process almost all in one night. And I woke up the next day and I had a couple of realizations. The first one was I realized that my mom didn't die because she was an addict. My mom died because she didn't love herself. And that further went to me, my next aha moment of like, I don't love myself either.
Right.
And so how do I really begin to build that journey of loving myself? And I think that's really the secret to life. Like, I think that if every single person on this planet had self-love, we wouldn't have war, we wouldn't have homelessness, we wouldn't have addiction, all these things. And so that was really my journey in the beginning of it. And you can actually go back and see it play out on the podcast. I always say the first 2 years of the podcast were for me. Those questions were for me. Like, it's just crazy.
Right. We got a lot in common, man. I've definitely felt that too, because the first couple of years I was doing it, I was interviewing amazing people. We talked about Amberly. I think that was off camera, and just a couple mutual connections we have that are amazing people, Ed included. I had the opportunity to interview him in another show, and he was great to me and gave me a lot of great pointers and compliments. And I'm thinking, like, inside I was actually it was like a tornado, my whole world around me. I just left corporate and like basically fell flat on my face after a year. And I'm interviewing Ed Milet, and he's telling me like, you're bright, the future's looking good for you and all this stuff. And I believed it, and kept going, and great things have happened since. Something that's interesting. Yesterday I was cutting the grass, and as we record this, yesterday was Memorial Day. So, family day, had an amazing time with my daughter, and my sister came over and my mom. We all hung out. And before that all happened, I was cutting the grass, and it's kind of a great time for me to free my mind. And something I thought of is, humans naturally are like, we love to help each other, right? Like, it's weird. When I was thinking about all the crazy bad stuff that was going on, I was reflecting on it, and I'm like, in our natural, like, animals hunt because they need to eat, right? They're not like going to go after someone and try to danger or injure or harm just for fun. Typically, most animals, it's just all nature. And I think human nature is to help out our neighbor. Like, we see someone who needs help and we go and help them. But when things come into our lives that are like turmoil, it kind of starts to disconnect, right? All the different problems and stuff. And it's like, how do we get back to just being almost that pure state again, where we can go back to just our number one thing is help each other out? I think I can summarize it with compassion. Humans naturally have compassion and kindness, and it gets a little bit stolen from us, and we got to come back to it. Because now, I even have t-shirts for the show. This is BGBG, be great, be grateful. I have be kind. And it's like, why do I even have to remind myself to be kind? Because there's all this crap that gets put in our life. But I think compassion is the word that came to me yesterday. And I see that in your story too, once you started to figure things out and you started to have it going for you, even before you had it figured out, you were leading with compassion. I see that in your stage, presentations, on your show, the people that you connect with. Shout out to John Beebe for connecting us. He's a guy who leads with compassion himself. So I think that's why we're aligned. And then second, we found out that we both have these cool podcast companies that are similar to one another. And we're even talking potentially we're better together, right? So there's this potential for us to work together. I'm excited about it. But I want you to give your company some love right now and let people know, because there's a lot of, like I said, entrepreneurs either thinking about podcasting, they have a show, they're kind of stuck, or they're like, man, I want to rocket this thing just like Justin did. So share about your podcast company a little bit.
Yeah. So real quick before we talk about that, by the way, I'm my least favorite thing to do is self-promote. But we'll get to that, right?
But let's take a back step then, Justin, because before we self-promote, I want people to understand why you're even in podcasting. Let's kind of do this first. So what do you absolutely love most about podcasting? What are some of the key benefits that you get from doing your show?
Dude, it's funny. When I started podcasting, the original idea behind it was I wanted to interview entrepreneurs to pick their brains so I could learn how to be a better entrepreneur. Because although I did well in the corporate world, I had 3 failed businesses at the time. When my mom passed away, it shifted my perspective and it really became about life, overcoming adversities, finding self-love, doing all these things. And what I realized was, number one, I didn't know if anybody was ever going to listen. I didn't even really know anything about podcasting when I started. I bought a microphone, bought a $70 course online, and I was like, oh, let me figure out how to do this. And for a long time, nobody really listened.
Some people still gave you the deer in headlights and you should have a podcast. They're like, what's that? I mean, now it's the opposite, right? I have heard you explain this. It's like when we started our shows, I was 2019 even, and people were still like, what is this podcast thing? And now it's like, oh, you have one too. It's a whole different response we get. But anyway, take us back to that moment when you were just kind of green and getting started, falling in love with it.
For sure, man. Yeah. I enjoyed the process, but I was like, well, nobody's listening. Like, what's the point? Blah, blah, blah. And right when I was thinking about shutting it down, I got a message from somebody from Japan. And they said, because of your show, I decided not to take my life.
Wow.
And I realized in that moment that I have to keep showing up. Whether it's one person listening or 1 million people listening, I got to keep showing up. And it allowed me to kind of push through. I think it was a nod and a wink from the universe. And it allowed me to kind of push through that moment of self-doubt. And now, honestly, my favorite part about podcasting, obviously being able to connect with people who listen to my show, but my favorite part is connecting with people I get to interview. A lot of them end up becoming friends, mentors, buddies. They speak at my events. They do all these things. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be able to build strong relationships with incredible people, right? Like, you look at us forming a relationship and a friendship now, like this wouldn't happen if it weren't for podcasting. It's the greatest networking tool on the planet. And then on the flip side, you can build a brand that makes a massive impact in the world. And, to kind of get to that self-promotion part, that's where Podbrand came from. I realized that 80% of podcasts do less than 100 downloads an episode. Now, that sounds terrible, but on the flip side, what I say all the time when I say that to people is like, sure, only 100 people, but if you had a room full of 100 people to speak to every single week, would you show up? Right? Now, all of a sudden, when we get on the internet, we think it should be this crazy thing. And it's just, I think we need to calm our expectations a little bit.
That's a really great analogy, because I think it gets you realizing that what's most important is the connection to those 30, 50, 75 people. If you have a stronger connection there and they keep coming back and they tell their buddy and friend about it, and now they're actually listening, and you look at your numbers and those downloads actually equate to 50% or more of the episode listened to, which means there was a real connection and they're not just hearing your your ad and your intro and bolting. That's so important. I think, people can be very much vanity metric whores. I hate to say it, but that's true. And people chase it and then they end up chasing the wrong thing. So really, really good point to get on the show.
Yeah. Thank you, man. And honestly, I think that the statistic is something like 80% of your podcast listeners will listen to most of, if not all of, every single episode. So this is the only long form medium that people are paying attention to. Like, everything else is quick hits, right? 60-second clip on Instagram, 15-second clip on TikTok, whatever the case may be. That's what they're consuming other than podcasts. So it's a really cool thing that you're able to do that and hold the attention of people. But what I realized was they have something really important to say, whether they're talking about life, entrepreneurship, cars, whatever their show is about. They have something important to say. And it should be seen, and you should be able to build a platform off of it and do with it what you want, whatever that is, right? Build a business, get sponsors, whatever. And so I decided to build out Podbrand, which is a company where we create algorithm-friendly social media content based around your podcast. And it's really, really cool to see how when you elevate your platform, you can start to position yourself with higher level people, which obviously ups your game as a person. And then the third part is which is the third P of podcasting, in my opinion, which is partnerships. Is to create partnerships with organizations and companies where you can potentially fund the podcast. You can help build out certain things that you're doing because you're creating strong partnerships with certain brands and companies. But it all starts with that first piece. Like, how are you showing up on the internet? Are people seeing it? Is it making sense? Is it getting through? Is it the right clip? Whatever. And that's where Podbrand came from. And it's really, really neat to see. Like, we actually have one client. He went from 0 to 7,000 followers on TikTok. And he's regularly doing 50, 60,000 views per TikTok video that we've created for him. And it's really neat because he literally, I mean, he had other presences on the online, but this is a whole new account that he started at zero. And it's just really, really cool to see, to go, you had an important message to be heard, and now people are hearing it. And I mean, his podcast numbers aren't doing that well, not even close, but people are still hearing his message.
But yeah, and now they have a great click-through opportunity to get to the podcast and become a regular listener and listening all the way through. I mean, it's no different. I know right now the new Indiana Jones movie's coming out, I think, at the end of June. We record this. It's the end of May right now. So we got about a month to the day that the new Indy film comes out. But here's the deal. I just saw 3 previews for it yesterday during the Yankees game. My brother texted me, "Did you see the new preview?" and sent me like the longer version of it that has like the Rolling Stones song in it, and the way that they meshed it together with the indie theme was awesome. And why am I even talking about it right now? Because the promo for that movie is happening in 60-second and 2-minute clips right now, right? And we're seeing it all over social media, and then we're going to go see the movie. It's the same thing with people aren't going to hear your full hour-long interview first and then want to watch your social clips. They're going to get these little, you're basically bringing them along, and eventually they're going to want the whole cake, right? You're going to give them a little slice here and there. So that's how people need to be thinking about it, the micro content piece. And one of the reasons I'm interested in your company is we have editors on our team, obviously, internally at Social Chameleon, but I'm looking to scale my company. I'm looking to go to the moon with this thing and further. And so working with a great company with you that has even more editors on staff, we could really scale it. We could work together, and there's no drop off. There's great leadership. All right. And I'm talking about you, and I like to work myself into that equation, but I'm always learning and growing. But great leadership, and then just continue to scale, right? And it's really hard to do when you're obviously you yourself, working alone. So great people, like you said, connections. What are a couple other things? And by the way, guys, I just want you to know, Justin's being super humble. He's got 475 plus episodes out there, top 1% in the world. On a regular basis, he's getting over hundreds of downloads in like over 100 countries. So I appreciate you being humble, but I just want to make sure I'm letting people know that your show is definitely one of the top in the game, and Podbrand came from it. And it's really cool. Would you say that a lot of the things that you learned kind of through making your own mistakes and as you were scaling your podcast were things you learned and now apply to your company?
Dude, everything.
Yeah.
Like I've done literally everything wrong from day one. Like I used to coach people. I still do from a rarity time to time. If it's somebody I kind of got to know and they're like, "Hey, can I hire you?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." But I used to coach people all the time on how to do podcasting. And all I was telling them was like, "Don't do this because I did this wrong." Right. Like every single thing that I've ever created in my life, in my opinion, has been based off of things that I've done wrong. Like outside of the podcast space, I have a mastermind of high-level entrepreneurs. I do live events. I speak, all these things. But I've always had my foot in podcasting because I believe in the medium. I believe the medium can change the game for anybody who wants to get involved. And Podbrand was just the latest iteration, and I feel like we could serve at such a deep level, and I had already had an infrastructure kind of in place that I could build the business around, which made it a lot easier for me to go, okay, now we can be scalable quickly. But for me, it was like, how do I give them a tool where they don't have to add any work to their plate, and it literally gives them a decent return? And this was it, man. Like my social media content used to be absolute trash. Nobody would see it. I was the person running around going, "Oh, I've been shadow banned." But the reality is you're not shadow banned. You just suck. And you just got to get a little bit better. And that happens with time and repetition. I get people to say to me all the time, "Hey man, this was one of the best interviews I've ever had." And they'll like respond afterwards, or they'll share it out and be like, "Justin's the master of the game." I used to not be. That was repetition of 475 plus interviews, and getting better and becoming more curious instead of worrying about what should I, answer or ask next. And it was just repetition. But that's every single thing that I feel like I've ever built has been based off of my mistakes. And I'll continue to make mistakes, and I'll continue to build.
Absolutely. We all will. But that was a little bit of, you're just hanging out under the net, and I just shot that right over to you. And the reason is our early stage entrepreneurs, really that doesn't matter on what your age is. You could be 65 and looking to start up your first company right now. You're retired from your W-2 and now you're like, I want to get into this game of entrepreneurship, whatever it might be. But the encouragement there is, I didn't know your backstory, but I knew that there was 100% chance you're going to say that you learn from your failures on that, because I've experienced them myself, especially in this medium. But why is that so important for the people tuning in? Not to run away from being afraid to fail, or to do it wrong a little bit, or to do it right and then replicate that over and over again, right? It's super, super important. So I really appreciate you sharing that and giving your version of it. They've heard me talk about it more so on other shows than my own, because on this show, you know the drill. When you're the host, you kind of get out of the way and let the guests shine. We're going to do that, and we're going to take a quick break right now, give our sponsors some love. We'll be right back in a couple minutes here, quick minutes with Justin Schenck.
Podcasting is a great way to engage with your audience and stay consistently relevant. The only problem is you don't have the time or desire to produce your own show. You simply want it done for you, and that's where Social Chameleon comes in. All you need to do is press record and upload the files. We'll handle the rest. From planning, production, post-production, distribution, and digital marketing, we have you covered. We realize that times are tough and funds are tight, and Social Chameleon believes in building supportive business relationships. By clicking on the link in this promo, we'll provide you 7 free podcasting tips to get started, as well as a free 30-minute online consultation. This is the perfect opportunity for entrepreneurs, keynote speakers, industry experts, influencers, and anybody who has a personal brand. With Social Chameleon, we help you build a brand that is out of this world. We're ready and waiting, so what are you waiting for? Click on the link to get started today. Hey guys, it's Mike. I'd like to give a proper shout out to Navigator Bookkeeping. Look, for a long time, I ran my business without really understanding the full financial picture. I used my gut and my bank account balance to make decisions, which led to some poor choices and constant stress over my business's finances. I knew something needed to change. At the beginning of 2021, I made a decision that helped pave a more clear path for my business. I started working with Navigator Bookkeeping. Since then, my bookkeeping has been handled for me. I now understand the full financial story of my business, making important financial decisions much easier now, and it helps me plan for where my business is going. I highly recommend giving Navigator Bookkeeping an opportunity to help your business. Check them out at navigatingyourbooks.com. Again, that's navigatingyourbooks.com. It's time to know the full financial story of your business.
All right, we're back in action with Justin Schenck. And remember, you guys can connect with him on social. I have all the links clickable in the show notes as far as his website, his social media. It's all right there for you. You don't have to worry about spelling his name. I got that in there. And as we talked about before the break, is Justin is crushing it with his show. And if you're interested in more of his episodes, I definitely feel that's a great place to go. There's close to 500 episodes, as I mentioned, and it's called Growth Now Movement. I'll have that clickable in the show notes as well. I want to pick the story right back up. We talked about you in your early days getting into podcasting, how you turned it into Podbrand, built these amazing connections, built up your inner circle. And as an entrepreneur, I know that I'm only as strong as the people around me in my network. And, you know, you can't have 50 best friends, right? So you got to have a core. There's a core. And you always hear you're kind of the accumulation of the 5 people you hang out with most. So can you talk about how, like, the 5 people in your inner circle is really super important to your success, and who those people are and how you sometimes maybe need to change them out?
Yeah, man. I appreciate you asking that question. So obviously we all know the quote, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? That's by Jim Rohn. One of the most...
I butchered it a little bit. Thanks for fixing it.
Yeah, it's something like that, right? So like Jim Rohn, who, you know, it's such a popular quote because it's true. Like, but when I heard it when I was 19, I thought I had to get rid of all my friends, go find 5 millionaires, hang out with them only, never go hang out with anybody else. And then I quickly realized, like, what group of millionaires wants to hang out with a 19-year-old loser? And so I kind of just was like, this quote's a sham. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I would hear, like, as I got older, I was like, oh man, that's dumb. And then I was able to create success in my life. And I decided to go back to that quote and assess, what are those 5 people? Like, who are the people that I chose in my life through my growth, through my worries, through my whatever, who were those people? And I realized that I had always had 5 people that filled specific roles in my life. So the first person is your cheerleader. This is the person that makes you feel like when you get off the phone with them or you're done hanging out with them, you feel like you can run through a brick wall, right? Like that buddy you call up, you go, hey, I think I've got $1 million idea. And he goes, that's $1 billion idea, right? That person who really hypes you up. The second person is your bruiser. This is the person, and just to be clear, this is not an abuser. It's a bruiser. They come from a loving place, but they question your moves. They say, hey, is that the right way to go about it? Like how can you do this better? The third person's your softie. That's the shoulder to cry on, right? Like you hit the brick wall and you need to cry it out. That's the person for you, and they help pick you back up. The fourth person is a mentor. Now I look at mentor a little bit differently. A lot of people say, oh, your mentor, if you're a podcaster, your mentor should be in podcasting, whatever. I don't look at it that way. For me, a mentor is somebody who has an innate characteristic that you want more of in your life. So I already consider myself a giver, but I want to give on a even bigger level. And so my mentor is actually a guy named Fabio Viviani. Most people may know him from the show Top Chef. He does about $300 million in business a year, all in restaurants and food services and stuff like that. I never want to be in food service, and I don't ever need to make $300 million a year. Like that's not my goal in this lifetime, but he gives so much. And so he's become my mentor over the last number of years. And then the fifth person is a coach. I believe at any given time, you should have a financial investment in your future. And you could look at a coach like it's a mastermind or a one-on-one coach or however, but always have a financial bet in your life to go, okay, hey, I need to be financially locked in. So I do the work. So I take the steps. And so as I've grown and evolved and truly made massive leaps, I've always had these 5 people in my life. And here's what I realized. When you have those 5 people, life is just so much better. When you win, you can celebrate with amazing people. When you lose, they're there to help you. Like it's easier to navigate all those hard things. And so I know when I fall on my face, I know who I need to call, right? My cheerleader. I know when I'm looking to make a big shift, I know I need to call my bruiser, right? The scary phone call, because you're like, he's going to tell me I'm wrong. He or she's going to tell me I'm wrong. But it's really about having those core 5 people. And I challenge everybody listening right now to write down those 5 things, right? Cheerleader, bruiser, softie, mentor, coach, and write down if you have them. And the one thing I will say is one person cannot be 2. It needs to be 5 individual people. And you almost use them as kind of like in your tool belt, right? Like when I need this, here's who I reach out to. When I need this, here's who I'm going to go to. And that has changed the game for me once I realized that. And then I became super intentional about making sure I have the right people in those spots at all times.
Yeah. It's really powerful, man. Like, guys, go back and listen to that again. I'm going to go back, write that down, and be something I review over time. I think it's really important that the 2 biggest for me that hit are mentorship and coaching. And sometimes those kind of cross-pollinate a little bit. But the reason I say it's super important is I've always had these big ideas, and I'm kind of like a bull in a china shop with some of it, and I just want to get started. And that's probably my greatest asset, is that I'm just willing to go, and I'm not afraid of failure anymore. Like I'm just willing to go and figure it out. And entrepreneurship taught me, like, you're always figuring things out. When it goes sour or goes south or whatever, like you figure it out and you keep going. And you could reach out to other people and figure it out. You can go to Google and find out something, a solution to a problem you didn't even know you had yesterday, that kind of stuff, right? But once things changed for me is when I started, joined a mastermind group. I'm in a great Christian group with guys right now called Convene. And I have, over the last couple of years, I spent a lot of money on coaching, and I'm happy to do that because it's an investment in my future. And I've hit the greatest financial months with the company during the months that I've been receiving coaching and been in a mastermind group. That's not by accident. The other ones I think are great. Like you said, having the bruiser, the softie. It's kind of like parents, right? Like my mom was a softie. My dad was kind of the bruiser. He'd keep me in a line. Very hard to get a pat on the back from dad. Mom, almost too much. Like, almost like, okay, Mom, I'm good. And then what was the other one? Was the fifth one? The first one, really?
The cheerleader.
The cheerleader. Yeah, you need that too. Someone who just, they're so excited for you. You're like, man, I think they're more excited about this than I am, right? Amazing. Really, really great perspective. That's awesome, brother. Now, have you ever considered putting your story into a book? Is that something you're working on, or we will see in the near future, do you think?
Dude, there's so many recordings of me talking about how I'm writing a book. So I originally was writing a different book and I scrapped it. And so now I am currently writing a book. It's been on pause for a couple of months, just got into the wedding season, got married, did all the things. And so now I can revisit it to wrap it up. I'd say I'm probably about halfway done it, but it's about the 5 people in your life. And I intertwine my life story into it a little bit. The reality is, one day I hope that I could write a book and people would really care about just reading my life story. But that's what I'm building now is in a sense, a legacy. But I think giving them the tools to create their own legacy is the most important part. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to be my legacy, is allowing others to build their legacy. And so this book, I'm really excited about it. Just got to get it out. And then I want to put a little quiz together with it that'll tell you what role you play for others, which I think is exciting, right? It's important to know that I know damn well that I wish I was a cheerleader, but I'm a bruiser because I'm kind of a jerk. So like, that's just part of it,
Yeah.
But yeah, man, so writing the book and my story will be intertwined just to give reference to what I'm talking about.
Right.
But it's not necessarily a book about me, if that makes sense.
No, it kind of builds the world of scene to understand what platform this is being built on. And Justin's got his story and version, and people can relate and connect to you, and that helps them obviously connect to the story. It's why we care about in a movie, why we care about the ending, is because we care about the characters in the beginning of the story, and it continues on. And the reason I ask is when you just talked about the 5 people like that, the way you articulated it and the way that you were energized behind it, and I could kind of feel your body language shifted, like you were ready to educate. I could just see how well that would translate into a book. And personally, I'm just going to share this real quick. Like, I love reading because it's where I like really compound on my think, and a lot of the stuff I do today is things I've learned in books over the last decade. I also listen to a lot of podcasts, like when I'm doing work around the house or driving, my daughter here or there, and also doing yard work. That's kind of my Zen time to learn. But there's a difference in like just hearing great conversations about topics to really like well articulated, written, revised, and I just highlight the heck out of it. And I'll read it like 6 times, and maybe on the 6th time, it finally unlocks in my brain, and then I go and actually apply it. So I think having that book is really cool for a lot of people to get the stuff that you're sharing on your show over, 475 episodes. They can kind of get it, the best accumulation of all of that in one spot. I think that's really cool. And then talking about this for myself, eventually I'd love to do the same thing. And I feel like I'm kind of in maybe chapter 2 of my story, right? God willing, that I continue to go live a beautiful life. But I feel like I'm kind of in chapter 2. You might be in, I'd say chapter 4, maybe. How do you feel about that? Chapter 5? Who knows?
Sure. Who knows, man? I don't even know. Like this is why I can't write this is what takes me so long to write a book. It's just a bunch of jumbled thoughts put together that happen to fall in sequence. It seems pretty cool, right?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like God, man. He wrote an amazing book, Max Out. I read that thing in probably 2 days, and I just couldn't put it down. And then he just wrote another one, The Power of One More. And like, I'm sure he'll have another one in a year or 2. So it doesn't mean like you have one book to write. You're going to keep adding to it, which is really super exciting. We talked about the 5 most important people in your life, especially in business. Can you talk about like the 3 or 4 key components that have, if you have to sum up your success and say like these 3 or 4 things really were the key drivers in my success over the last couple of years, what jumps out at you immediately when you think about that?
Understanding that growth happens on the other side of fear. You talked about this earlier, right? To the startup entrepreneur, the people who are dreaming about being an entrepreneur, it's real comfortable being where you are a lot of times. But I guarantee you there's more discomfort in the fact if you don't push through and exceed your dreams. Because look, everything I do that's new, whether it was launching the mastermind this last year or announcing a big event or doing smaller, higher ticket events, whatever, whenever I do it for the first time, I'm terrified. Like just because I've had success doesn't mean there's still not fear. So number 1 is to understand that growth happens on the other side of fear, and happiness is in growth for me, right? So that means happiness is on the other side of fear. Second, to understand, again, we talked about those 5 people. I think that's an immeasurable thing for me. I think once people start to realize that, and I've been talking about it now for probably about 6 to 8 months, if not longer. And so people are starting to kind of implement it into their life. And I hear them come back to me and go, dude, this was game changing. Like once I literally realized that I could utilize this as a tool, it changed their life. And so that's the second thing. And then number 3, and I'll take it back to my show really quick. And so people ask me all the time, like, what's the common theme between all your people? Now I've had WWE Hall of Famers, I've had comedians, I've had actors, I've had, all these different types of people on my show. But I was like, so what's the common theme, right? I had Bert Kreischer, who loves to pound beers. And then I had, Andy Frisella, who's one of the most disciplined human beings on the planet. And so I looked back and I went, there's a question that I ask, and it's a 2-part question. The first part is, what is your definition of success? The second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself? Now, obviously, their definition of success is always different. I'll be a good parent, or to make sure my employees are taken care of, or whatever. But then I realized there was a common theme in the things they did every single day. They took care of themselves first, right? As entrepreneurs, as impact-driven entrepreneurs, where we want to help others, sometimes we just give and give and give and give and give, and then our cup is empty. But the reality is, you cannot pour from an empty cup. And so not my new thing, I've been saying this for years, but my whole thing is like, what's in my cup is for me, and what overflows is for everybody else. And so I have 4 non-negotiables every single day that fill my cup in some way, shape, or form. And when I started doing that, everything else became easier. It became easier to do the work. My relationships became better. My health became better. All these things became better because I decided to make sure I take time for myself every single day. And it's just 4 non-negotiables. And I think that when people realize, when you fill your cup up, you're actually being selfless. And the most selfish thing, or the most selfless thing you can do, is to be selfish and to take that time for yourself so you can be present, so you can give more.
Yeah. When you're on an airplane, what do they tell you to do? Take care of yourself
put
first.
Your mask on first.
Yeah, then you can help other people. You're no good without that, right? So I definitely agree. Put that oxygen mask on, and then you can help out way more people. I think that's beautiful. What I always like to do to kind of put a bow on an episode is give you an opportunity to talk about legacy. You kind of were leading up to it nicely there. And so you've been a great dancing partner, no surprise, in the podcasting space. You get it. And so I really appreciate you. And I'd love to put kind of the exclamation point on this interview today. And I'm sure I'm going to have you on a bunch of other times over the years. But wrap up, talk about legacy for a second, right? So we talked about being the author in your own story, the protagonist in your own life story. So God willing, you continue to live a long and prosperous life, and you get to write the ending. What would that look like for you, for your legacy?
Bro, that's a powerful question.
Yeah.
I think for me, I think obviously this has changed over the years. I'm now married. I have 2 stepkids, all who I love dearly, even though the kids can be challenging at times. Love them to death, though. When I'm on that deathbed, I want to make sure that I'm surrounded by those people who are closest to me, and that they are celebrating my life with me, knowing that I lived a full life, knowing that I made a big impact in the world, and knowing that I love them unconditionally. And I want people to say about me when I die, I left a better person after I knew him than before.
Right.
Whatever that means to them. And I think that's a really cool legacy to leave behind, because that means I made a positive impact in people's lives as I became friends with them and built rapport with them and all those things. So yeah, sums up. Obviously I feel like I wish that I had 3 hours to think about this and contemplate, but that's what off the top of my head right there.
You know what I love about doing this show is that question comes up. It's pretty much how I wrap up every episode, especially when it leads there. And the reason I love it, and people might be sick of hearing me say this, but whenever I have a great guest like yourself on, which is often, they start talking about legacy, and I'm thinking, you're doing it. You're building these stepping stones to what you're talking about. You're already doing it. You're involved with people that are close to you in your life, that you love, that they love being in your life. It would be no surprise if at the very end that they're all coming to you, right? And can say, this guy, helped me out tremendously. And it's not just going to be direct family members. It's going to be people who you brought into your family, which could be your business family, your network. So I think you're already doing it, brother, and just continue to compound on that over time. And it's not about you, like you said, and I love that aspect of it. It's about the difference that you can make through your life, through your story, and everything. Dude, this has been a ton of fun. Last one is, I got to ask you this question. Congratulations, by the way. I know you didn't know I was coming with this today, but April 1st, April Fool's Day, was a special day for you this year. Share with the audience what I'm talking about.
Yeah, dude. So obviously now we're here at May 30th. I'm about to click over to 2 months being married. which is wild. It's my first.
Well,
it's my
fools
first and
fall
only,
in love.
Yeah, no, that's it. Well, that was also our first date. So it was 4 years to the day of us actually meeting. And it was like perfectly written, right? You couldn't have asked for a better day, a beautiful day. And we had an incredible honeymoon, but I'm enjoying being a husband. It's still weird saying my wife. I'll say that. Like I have to stop and think every single time. But blessed to have her, man. She's my softie. She's an incredible person, who's so supportive of me and my crazy ideas that I couldn't ask for anything better.
I'm glad you smiled when I brought up the fact that you got married on April Fool's Day, because I thought maybe you'd be a little jaded from like the jokes about it. And how'd you do that? But did you have people right up to the day kind of thinking that it could potentially be a joke?
So I actually had one person call me. It's actually the guy who was my bruiser. And he called me and he's like, dude, so I know that you're getting married April 1st. His wife, she's like, Tanya doesn't believe it. So I need to actually verbally confirm with you that there's actually a wedding happening on April 1st. That was after we sent out the save the dates, and the save the dates kind of had a joke on it too. So that was the only one who actually said, hey, is this actually happening? Other people joked about it though, but it was really like, that's awesome. One person. So I'll take it.
Yeah. Dude, I'm super happy for you. I love seeing your family post. We're going to get together soon. You're in Philly, correct?
Yeah, man. Well, dude, I'm like 10 minutes from John.
If you're 10 minutes from John, then the three of us, we can get lunch, dinner, something soon. My daughter lives about 45 minutes from you. So there's I'm there once a month minimum. So I'll be up there to hang out with you guys soon. And I'm really looking forward to it. It's just another great person. Look, you're going to be one of those 5 people I feel like in my life. I always end every episode with this: be great and be grateful. And Justin, I'm super grateful to have you as a friend and connection. Thank you for sharing your story with the mic'd up audience.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Thank you for hanging with us all the way until the end. If you haven't done it already, you can click right over here to subscribe to my channel. Make sure you turn on your notifications so you're notified of all of the updates. If you guys like shorter clips, I have mic drop moments right here. That's when my guest gives an amazing insight, and we capture that right here. Mic drop moments, and down here are the full-length episodes. All my previous episodes are right there.